Finding no other viable alternatives, this court hereby orders that Roy S. Moore be removed from his position of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama. This court is now adjourned.
Wow. That is one of the lowest points in American judicial history, right?
Well, it's a low point in the law, too, because, Jan, if anybody in Iowa, anybody in any state of this union, whether it be in municipal court, county court, district court, Court of Appeals, United States Supreme Court, disobeys an order, the only person that can punish that person is the judge who gave the order, because he knows the circumstances. He gave the order. A contempt hearing is set, and you have a reason to show cause why you should not be held in contempt. That was violated in my case. The federal district judge never punished me, never said I should be removed. It was transferred to a judicially appointed state committee that said they would not consider the lawfulness of the order, and therefore they removed me whether or not it was a lawful order or an unlawful order, and I had no appeal to the Supreme Court for removal from my office. So you've got to understand this contempt hearing was done differently than would apply to any person, and any lawyer that's listening should know this.
Why?
It's the court that punishes you, not some other body.
Why isn't that itself an appealable offense?
Well, it just wasn't appealable in the federal court. It wasn't appealable to the federal court because the federal court didn't remove me.
So did that panel, that committee, have the jurisdiction to remove you?
They were appointed, and it was appealable to the Supreme Court, appointed Supreme Court, another appointed court. Yes. Because, you see, the Supreme Court couldn't hear it. I served on the Supreme Court, and they were eliminated for consideration. So they made a show of drawing other names, and on that court were people who had been very much in opposition to me throughout the years. So what I'm saying is it was not done legally, but I'm not here to defend that case. Right. I think that it was a stand on my oath, and I'm not ashamed to have done what I did, and I would do it again, and that's what they didn't like me to say.
Well,
I'd do it again.
By doing what they did, however, and they required you to step down from that post, that certainly didn't take you out of the running. It certainly didn't take you out of the culture. You have been on a tear ever since.
Well, you've
been everywhere talking about this.
I've been talking across the United States about the Constitution, about our need to return to the principles of the Constitution, and certainly we're so far departing from that today under this administration that you could talk for days and weeks. Well, I think you do.
Yes.
About the fact that we don't even abide by the Constitution anymore.
It's kind of a dead letter, isn't it?
It's like we're considering it irrelevant, and yet it was the most brilliant document ever devised, a form of government by the mind of man. And there's a reason for that. The recognition of the fallen nature of men by Madison and others said that we had to constrain the powers of man into different branches with checks and balances and separation of powers, and so that the accumulation could not be in any one branch, which would cause a despotism. They also had the federalism principle in the 10th Amendment that said that those powers which were given to the federal government were specifically enumerated, and the remainder were left to the states or to the people. And we are completely negating all that. We see a federal government that's grown so large, and the bureaucracy is so egregious,
right,
that they're making laws not through the Congress, but in the courts, for example.
Well, that's exactly what they are doing. We were talking about this last week with Roe versus Wade.
Yes.
That is considered by the left wing to be the law of the land.
And by the right wing appointees to the court as being well-established precedent, which they will not address. The conservatives will not address well-established precedent. The liberals have no compulsion or no inhibition from going and overturning recent precedent. They did that in Lawrence v. Texas in 2003 when they said that the sodomy was a right. And yet 17 years earlier in Bowers versus Hardwick, they said there was no right to commit sodomy in the Constitution. So if you look at the document, Lawrence v. Kennedy, and see where they got the right, they tell you they got it from France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. When justices on the Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, are ruling by foreign law, they should be impeached. because they're sworn to the
When was the
Constitution.
last time, outside of for just overt acts of criminal behavior and overt corruption, was a sitting judge impeached?
It's been a long time. I don't know. They don't, and that's our fault because we're trained to think that judges are above the law because they can make the law. Well, judges are not there to make the law.
Thomas Jefferson said the impeachment threat is a scarecrow. It doesn't work.
Well,
he said
he knew what he was talking about.
He said we have unleashed a potential for despotism and tyranny because we did not bind the nature of the courts, and he foresaw everything that we're now experiencing.
Exactly, and Washington foresaw it. In his farewell address, he said that it's important to keep the various branches separate, and if one starts to assume the power of the other, it will result in a despotism. He said a just estimate of that love of power and the proneness to abuse it, which predominates in the human heart, is sufficient to satisfy us of the truth of this position. That's his farewell address in 1796.
So, Judge Moore, why are you here in Iowa? And Danny Carroll is with a family organization here in Iowa, and he's brought you along with. Good morning, Danny. How you doing, sir?
Morning, Jan. Good to be with you.
You are. When we come back here in a moment, you guys have a real explicit reason for being here in Iowa, and I'm going to just let you have the microphone and run with it when we come back. Plus, we'll invite listeners to join us, 284-1040 or 800-469-4295. Back in a sec.